Committee, and that'll be wonderful. Thank you very much. I support this bill to the House.
I call the honourable member Tracy Martin. Tinakwe.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on the Education Amendment Bill, and I want to start with something I agree with. I want to start by saying that I agree with Nikki Kay when she says that this bill is a pivotal bill for this country inside education. However, I think it's in the wrong direction. But I would also say that if Ms Kay was actually the Minister of Education, that I would have greater faith and greater trust that open-mindedness would take part on both sides of the House in a conversation. So I'm sorry that Ms Kay is not the current Minister of Education, because I actually believe that she cares for the children of this country, that she understands and has an open mind and is prepared to work across party to make things right for the children of this country. Because none of us deny that 20% failing or not achieving at their best is not good enough. But I also want to acknowledge that in that 20% are a large number of special needs children who were out there, the parents of them were out there today, who have had their special needs units closed, who have been going to be put into mainstream schools and who are tracked by national standards, that add to those numbers who are not going to be cared for in any way, shape or form by this amendment bill. So I start with something that I agree with, and it is the quality of Ms Kay inside this House. I also want to say that I agree with the surrender and retention clauses in this bill, and I'm pleased to see it there. As a current member of a Board of Trustee, I'm pleased to not have to have the conversation in the future with some more virulent members of boards that they can't bring drug dogs into the school once every week just because they think it looks cool. So I'm very pleased that there will be some structure around the search and seizure abilities of the school boards of trustees. And I want to remind the House that when New Zealand first came into this House, we said we would vote on good legislation and we would vote against bad. The way this is worded right now is bad. It is not going to achieve what I think is truly the desire of the government, which is to start to lift the 1 in 5. I do not believe that this is the way forward. I believe it's going in the opposite direction, and the fact that Mr John Banks quotes from 1938 to justify this bill indicates that he's nowhere near a 21st century learning environment. And it's actually scary that Mr Banks has got anything to do with this bill, quite frankly. However, I don't think we should blame Mr Banks for this bill being here, because this work was done and was started prior to any agreement being signed with the ACT Party. And I do not want the National Government to have an excuse that when this goes bad, they're going to blame it on MMP. This was their idea. The Secretary of Education was hired some months before they actually signed into an agreement, and so they cannot blame this on MMP. This came from their cabinet. This government has turned the word choice into a weapon. They are using it to bash every public institution to death, quite frankly. They have altered the meaning of that word and turned it into a weapon against education, against health and against our public servants. Part 1 of this bill actually has a statement, and it says the right to free primary and secondary education. We all agree with that. But how about the right to know what your taxpayer dollar is being spent on? Why are these schools not included in any OIA requests? Why have they been exempted? Why? When parents, I'm very, very concerned. The bill actually says that charter schools are required to abide by the discipline procedures that are inside the Act. I'm very pleased to see that. However, they are exempt from the Ombudsman Act. That means at the end of the discipline procedure, when a child is excluded or expelled from any school, the last point of complaint is to the Ombudsman. And the Ombudsman actually can seek the records from the woe to go with regard to the discipline procedure to make sure that the processes of natural justice were carried out and that the board did not unduly influence or unduly require those parents to remove their child. That has been removed from charter schools. That means charter schools can exclude or expel students with nobody knowing why, with nobody have any oversight as to whether natural justice took part of that process or what the support mechanisms were put in by the schools to try and keep that child engaged in education. That is a major concern. I hope we can discuss it at this Education and Science Select Committee further. So, and how about the right to be consulted by your government before they decide to close or merge your school? I mean, that's another little issue that's come up in here, and it's a little bit with regard to I asked the Minister a question in the House the other day about whether any Christchurch schools that would be merged, whether the current 3-month period inside the Education Act 1989, the 3-month time frame by which new boards of trustees elections must be called for any merged schools would stand. And she said to me, yes, this bill removes that clause. This bill allows the Minister to decide to not do that. What that means to two schools being merged is, and I want to point out here too, that the Secretary of Education has actually been quoted as saying that New Zealand was too immature for tomorrow's schools when they were introduced, and that we needed to get rid of primary schools a long time ago. She said that in a public meeting. It doesn't give a great deal of confidence when the next thing you see is a clause in here saying that schools can be merged, but there is a removal of the requirement to hold a democratic process to elect the Board of Trustees to a school. So that means that the Minister could actually merge primary, intermediate and secondary schools into an educational hub, decide that the secondary school board is going to be the governing body, and that's it. Nobody else in that community for a 3-year period gets an opportunity to actually participate in the governance of their school. And what boards of trustees do, let's go to section 75 now, what boards of trustees do is they are the elected representatives of their parental communities who set the direction after consultation with their communities through their vision statement, through their charter, and then through the management with the annual plan. Where that part of the democratic process is actually, it's the first rung on it and it's another attack on it. This clause looks like another attack on that process, and it also, inside the charter schools provision, I don't see any provision for that communication, for that partnership, shall we say, with those communities. There is a sponsor, there is an owner, a private owner of a school. I don't even see in here actually, and I'm happy to work with the Education Science Select Committee and be proven wrong, but even under private schools, when there is a body that is appointed by the owners of those schools, that's not mentioned in here either. So it looks like the sponsor rules. And if ever there was a clause that shows you that this is just a business, then it's clause 23. This school, a partnership school, and there's another word that's been taken and actually manipulated, unfortunately, by this government. There's no partnership in here. There's no partnership in here. The Tomorrow Schools created a triangle of support for our students. It brought home and school together for the benefit of the student. There is no elected board. There is a sponsor that runs the school. There certainly is a contract that nobody can see. But there also now is a business leader in charge of the school. Not a teaching professional, not a person who has actually got any idea necessarily about teaching. Now, how can that person judge the educational outcomes? By what criteria can they judge the educational outcomes or the quality of teaching and learning that is happening there? They can't. They're a business leader. They can tell you, and I'm going to use these dreaded words, they can tell you how much profit they can get from the bulk funding that's going to happen inside these schools by saving on non-registered teachers or by cutting back on this or that or the other thing. But they will not be able to adequately report on the teaching and learning and the quality of it inside those schools. This is just me scratching the surface. We need a long time at Select Committee. We need to hear this, and maybe we might get something right.
Call Preseta Sam Lutuinga.
Mr Speaker, it's a pleasure to take a call on this, the first reading of the Education Amendment Bill. And sir, I also want to thank the Minister, John Banks, as well as Heke Parata, as well as Catherine Judd, for the work that they've done on bringing this bill to the House. And what does this bill show, sir? It shows that this government is committed to ensuring that every young New Zealander has the skills and qualifications required to successfully participate in our modern economy. And we agree with members across the House that we have a great education system in this country, and we have some of the highest spending in the OECD on education. But we can do better, sir. And what is the problem? Well, our government inherited an education system that saw 1 in 5 students leaving school without the ability to read, write and do maths, sir. And that means their ability to contribute to society is limited. It means that it leads to a high level of welfare dependency, and it leads to crime and incarceration, sir. And in terms of level 2 NCEA, which is